This is our next topic. In S3, you remember we had a look at how different substances are transported around the body in animals. That was your arteries and veins and so on. We also want to look at how plants do that, and that will lead us into looking at photosynthesis in more detail. So to begin with, the first section of this is to name and describe the function of the 7 parts of a leaf. And let's begin with this nice little video just to demonstrate it. So go into Twig through Glow and search for that and watch that video. So this is it. And just to orientate yourself, this is the bottom of the leaf here. Okay, and this is the top. So the top bit is the upper epidermis. That there is one of the mesophyll cells. That's a palisade mesophyll. Palisade is this kind of shape. Underneath that, this circular one, we call that the spongy mesophyll. There's an air space in the middle. Down the bottom, if that's the upper epidermis, then that is the lower epidermis. These things here, which look a bit like lips, those are called the guard cells. 1 guard cell, 2 guard cells. And the hole within that, or the pore to be a bit more scientific, is called a stoma, or the plural is stomata. Over here, this is what, if you pick up a leaf and you look at the little veins on it, this is what this is here. And they're split into 2, and these words, this one here is xylem, and this one here is phloem. So the one that's got what looks like rings in it, well they are rings, that's xylem, and then below that is phloem. Okay, so that's your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 parts of a leaf. Just another little drawing of it, this is a kind of side-on view. So there's the upper epidermis, palisade mesophyll cells, spongy mesophyll. We have got air space there, lower epidermis, bottom of the leaf. There's the guard cells, and then the pore in the middle, that is the stoma. So what do they do? So upper epidermis, to begin with, it's protection. As we get heavy rain or wind or whatever, that's a protective layer, but also it's transparent, which is important because you want light to enter for photosynthesis. These 2 types of mesophyll cells, they have got lots of chloroplasts in them, they're green, and as a consequence, this is where photosynthesis occurs, or the vast majority of it occurs within the leaf. Lower epidermis, that is a protective layer, and also they contain stomata, which have an important role related to water, which we'll talk about later. The vein, they are involved in transport of materials, and it's the xylem and phloem within the vein that allow that to happen. Stoma, as I mentioned, that is a pore on the underside of the leaf, and water exits through stoma. The guard cells, if you remember, they are on either side of the stomata, or either side of a single stoma, so they are involved in controlling the opening and closing of stomata. Okay, first little activity, what I'd like you to do is press pause and draw that table. And then, based on what I was talking about earlier, I'm going to see if you can remember the different functions. So see if you can fill in the table using those words. Can you remember the different parts of the leaf? Once you've done that, press play again. So here are the answers. Upper epidermis, protective layer, transparent to allow light entry. Palisade and spongy mesophyll cells, they contain many chloroplasts and they're the site of photosynthesis. The lower epidermis, protective layer, and they contain stomata. Vein, that's where you've got xylem and phloem, they transport things around the plant. Stoma is a pore on the underside of the leaf, water exits through them. And the guard cells, they control the opening and closing of stomata. Okay, have a break there. That was all I wanted to do to begin with. Obviously, there's some things we could have done in class, but we cannot. But that's the material that needs to be learned, so have a break. Okay, to begin with, let's do revision from the first lesson of this. So press pause and see if you can write down 1 to 9. What are the different parts of the leaf? So 1 palisade mesophyll, 2 upper epidermis, 3 spongy mesophyll, 4 air space, 5 is the lower epidermis, 6 is the stoma, 7 guard cell, and then 8 and 9, just make sure you get these the right way around. Number 9 has got rings in it, which means it's xylem, which means the 8 must be phloem. So those are your different parts of the leaf. Functions next. Fill in the gaps here. Press pause, write down 10 to 15, see if you can do this. So 10, that's the upper epidermis. 11, your palisade and spongy mesophyll cells contain many chloroplasts. The protective layer is the lower epidermis, there's stomata there. 13 is the vein, which contains xylem and phloem. Stoma, pore and underside of leaf, water exits the leaf through them. And guard cells, 15, control opening and closing of stomata. So we're going to move on to looking at how water is moved around the plant, and we're going to talk about particularly about xylem. So photosynthesis, this is key process, of course, on planet Earth, and simply carbon dioxide is taken in by plants, combined with water, which comes through their roots, and they turn this into sugar, and they also produce oxygen as a waste product. So we're looking at the water here, how it moves around the plant. So plants require water for photosynthesis and also to transport different material around, minerals, sugar, and so on. If you've got potato or anything that kind of produces bulbs, what happens is they produce sugar in the leaves during photosynthesis, and then the sugar gets moved down to what we call the potato and down at the roots, and that gets moved in water. So there's a sequence of events here to get the water up the plant. So we start off, we're down in the roots, and what you've got is root hair cells, which look like this. So water in the soil enters the plant's root hair cells by what process would water move into a cell? Osmosis. And in order to make sure this is efficient, root hair cells have a large surface area. So you can see here there's a lot of them, and there's lots of different places because this large surface area where water can enter the plant. Now have a look at this video. So we've got into the root hair cells, and the next thing is the water is going to go to xylem vessels. Now water here is a higher concentration than it is here, which means that the water is moving down a concentration gradient. Okay, so we're now in the xylem, and this is what they look like. So in the original diagram we saw those kind of rings, and they are called lignin. So xylem, they're dead, first of all, dead cells arranged in tubes, and the lignin is what is the substance which supports xylem. So you're going to have changes in pressure as water moves up and down this. Lignin ensures that the xylem vessels remain stable. Okay, so xylem, dead cells arranged in tubes, they contain lignin which supports xylem, allowing it to withstand pressure changes as water moves through the plant. And here's a video on xylem. This is what they look like. So there's your 2 xylem vessels here, and you can see the lignin. And what you're seeing, we'll know about tree stumps and counting the age of the trees. And what happens is, as the in in seasons where there's more water, you're going to have larger xylem, so you end up with these bigger rings. There's a rainy season, and you can see there's a kind of dry season here. Okay. Here's another good one. So here's a very old tree. Sad that it's been chopped down, but there you go. So you can see this area here, there's a mega drought here, so there's not been a lot of water moving through, so not as much growth, and then it's more kind of, when it's come out of this more kind of settled period, here's a particularly rainy year. So we've gone from root hair cells into xylem. The water then needs to go into the leaves, remember, because for photosynthesis. So it goes into the mesophyll cells for photosynthesis, and you can see that here. Alternatively, it can go into the air spaces. So if there's an excess of it, if there's more than is required by the plant for photosynthesis, it will evaporate as into water vapor, and evaporates, and it will leave the plant through the stomata. Now, this is why you have these rainforests where we talk about having their own weather systems, and there seems to be, you see the kind of water vapor, cloudy, sitting above them, and this is the water coming out through the stomata. And this process of water leaving the plant through the stoma is called transpiration. Okay, so simply water loss, transpiration is defined as water loss by evaporation, which is in the air spaces, then diffusion through stomata and leaves. And this is just a wee diagram. If you, on a hot day, if you could to get a bag and tie it around leaves like this, it will begin to fill up with water. Water being taken up through the roots evaporates out, and then when it touches the side of the bag, it condenses back into water. Something for you to try. Now remember, the water is leaving through the stomata, and you remember these words from earlier in the course. If a plant cell becomes full of water, it becomes turgid, and if that occurs, as you can see here, then it means that the stomata open up, so the guard cells become swollen. On the other hand, what's the opposite of turgid? Remember this? If the guard cells become plasmalized, if there's not that much water in them, then they will close. Okay, makes sense. So there's a lot of water around these cells, they open up and they expand. It means that you've got a stoma opening up, water can exit. If there's not so much water about, then they remain flaccid, plasmalized, and water doesn't exit the plant. So think about particularly wet season, and here this would be a dry season. And that kind of leads nicely into this. So the rate of transpiration increases. So the rate of water loss through leaves increases when, what do you think that represents? Hot conditions. That would represent dry conditions or windy conditions. So just because there's more of a gradient set up between the amount of water for dry and windy, there's more of a gradient set up between dry and wet. The wetness within the plant. Here's another couple for you to look at. So look for those in twig, plant transport, and also transpiration. Now you can measure transpiration rate, and you do that by using something called a pitometer. So you can see you've got a branch of a tree here or a plant, and what you can do is you can put it in water, and then you can, if you get in a capillary tube, you get a little bubble in there, and what's going to happen is if the plant takes up water, then that bubble is going to move up. So basically, if it moves up, if you get two plants and one of them, say it moves up 5 centimeters in an hour, and the other one it moves up 2 centimeters in an hour, then the one that's going up 5 centimeters would be a higher rate of transpiration. So 3 wee questions there for you to think about. Press pause. So first of all, what would happen to transpiration rate if a hairdryer was used in the plant? So that's, you get the heat, but also you've got windy conditions, so you would have an increased rate of transpiration. If the lights were switched off, the rate of photosynthesis would go down, so less water would be needed by the plant, so transpiration would decrease. Okay. Number 3, the heating was switched on, then temperature increase, so you'd have an increased rate of transpiration. So this little video, we have a look for this on YouTube. So this is what I was talking about with the bag. If if you happen to have a bag and were lost in the woods and needed some fresh water, then yeah, have a look at this video. And time for a second break. Okay, to begin with, press pause, see if you can fill in the answers here. So this is all to do with xylem and transpiration. Okay, water and minerals enter the plant through 1 root hair cells and are transported in 2 xylem vessels up the stem. Xylem are dead cells arranged in tubes. They contain rings of 3-lignin, which provides support, allowing xylem to withstand changes in pressure as the water travels up to the leaves. In the leaf cell, the water is used by mesophyll cells for photosynthesis. Alternatively, it enters air spaces, evaporates, and diffuses out of the leaf through 6 stomata in a process called sieving transpiration. Transpiration rate, measured using a photometer, increases when there is a large surface area for diffusion, i.e. when many stomata are present and when conditions are 9 hot, dry, or 10 windy. So the last bit of this, we've looked at the parts of the leaf, we've looked at xylem and transpiration, and to finish off we're going to talk about phloem. So sugar is produced during photosynthesis, and the job of the phloem is to move that around. Excuse me. So there's your xylem in the vein, phloem is there as well, remember. And if you look at phloem in some detail, it's actually made of 2 types of living cell. So remember, xylem is dead, phloem is living. So first of all, you've got sieve plates. Okay, so they're these kind of tubular cells, and they don't really have any organelles in them. They don't have many parts to them, so they're connected end to end. Then you have got what's called the companion cells. So that's these. Okay, so there's that's your sieve plate, sieve tube, and then you've got the companion cell beside them, and you can see immediately it's got a nucleus. So they provide the energy, and they are in control of the movement of sugar. Okay, so think of sieve plates, just the sugars moving up and down these, and then the companion cells are controlling that process, and they put together they make up a phloem. So a couple of drawings. So here's your sieve tube, sieve plate. There's the companion cell. Here's a view from above. That's looking down the end wall there. There's a video for you to look at. Okay, so that's this part of the topic. The topic is over basically. If I can get my words out. So let's just have a look at some questions. So we'll begin with this one. So this is from the 2015 paper. So describe the structures and process involved as water moves through the plant from soil to air. Okay, movement of water. Describe that, and you get 3 marks. Okay, so answers for this: 1 mark. Water moves into the plant by root hairs or root hair cells by osmosis or diffusion, and you need the word osmosis in there. So movement of water into the root hair cells by osmosis. 1 mark. Second, water then moves up the xylem. That's 2 points. And for the third point, asks about transpiration. So water leaves through the stomata and through transpiration, or it evaporates out, or it diffuses out. Okay, so first mark for root hair, second mark for xylem, and third part for talking about how the water exits the plant. But just make sure you've got the detail in there, descriptive